Why is Sarah J Maas so determined to give me the ick? I feel like I would have enjoyed this a lot more if I'd read it first. Kale is still my favourite character. I can see potential for me really liking their relationship. Oh no, we're following this person again. In that moment, I thought she was actually going to let it happen. But in this reading vlog, I am going to be finally continuing the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J Maas. This video will contain spoilers for the entire Throne of Glass series right from the beginning, so if you don't want spoilers, if you haven't read this series yet, then this probably isn't going to be the video for you. Because this is quite an older series, I have already heard spoilers myself, just from the internet being the internet, so I will probably discuss that sort of stuff as well. I will leave chapters just in case you would like to skip ahead to certain books, but because I don't know when certain things happen in the series, I might discuss them earlier, and also I might talk about my theories on stuff, and so I might end up accidentally spoiling stuff that I don't know I'm spoiling. I read the first book for the first time back in 2021, and I did that thing where I kind of enjoyed the first book. I gave it 3.5 stars. So in the back of my mind, I was thinking, okay, at some point I'm going to continue this series. But then months passed by and then years passed by, and it reached a point where I knew I was going to have to reread the first book to finally continue. So I have, at the time that I'm filming this, it's currently October 2024. I have now finally done my reread of Throne of Glass, which means I'm ready to read the remaining books for the first time. This I enjoyed a little more the second time around. There was a lot that I remembered, actually. There was a few things that I'd forgotten. Like, I'd remembered that this follows our main character Selena, and she is taken from this prison to the capital where she's taking part in this tournament to become the king's champion. I could remember that the champions started being killed off one by one, and I remembered who was responsible, but I forgot that this guy, Cain, I think is his name, I'd forgotten that he was summoning this beast from another realm, and I'd forgotten a lot about the history and how there was a former Fae Queen who was getting in touch with Selena and showing her stuff and guiding her. All of that had completely gone out of my brain, so I'm really glad that I did reread this. The first time I read this, I can remember thinking and saying that Kale was my favourite character, and I am so nervous because everyone I know who talks about this series says that they hate Kale and that his book, which I think Tower of Dawn concentrates on his story. I hear a lot of people saying that Tower of Dawn is their least favourite book in the series, and it's because of him, and I want to know, what does he do? What is so bad that everyone hates him? Selena was a lot more annoying this time around. However, I am putting that down to this book being a product of its time. This came out in 2012, and a lot of YA being published around that time had a main character with this type of personality, so I'm hoping that I do start to like her. I didn't like her as much in the beginning, but I think over time she started to grate on me a little less. I do have a theory, because I hear a lot of people talking about someone called Aelin, I think is their name, in this series, and I have a theory that Selena is Aelin. Their names are too similar. I feel like there's going to be some kind of link there, but yeah, I think that's everything I have to say at this point. I will let you know once I have made a start on Crown of Midnight. Haven't decided when I'm going to read Assassin's Blade yet, because I hear mixed things about when you should read it, but I know that it's a collection of short stories, and I think I'm just going to look up the publication order. I've heard some people say that you can read that first, but then it doesn't have as much of an emotional impact, so I think reading it later is going to be the best way to go. But yeah, I will let you know once I decide what I'm doing. Let's talk about Crown of Midnight, because I finished this a few days ago. I had a cold last week, which is why I didn't tell you that I was starting this, and it's taken me a few days to build up the drive to update this vlog. However, I have now finished book 2 in the Throne of Glass series, and I enjoyed this. I'm going to give it 4 stars. The beginning was kind of slow and it felt a little meandering. We were following our main character as she adjusts to her new role as the king's champion. We also see the development of her relationship with Chaol, and here's the thing, Chaol is still my favourite character. I think he is such a complex character. I find it so interesting how he feels this loyalty to his king and country, but now he's starting to question that. I feel like he could go through some really interesting character development. I do think the relationship between Celaena and Chaol, it developed quite quickly, even for a YA book where romances do tend to develop a lot quicker than in adult books. I hate spoilers because I know that Chaol is probably not endgame, and so when I'm reading about his and Celaena's relationship, I want to feel invested, but I don't want to get attached to them because I know that it's probably not going to go the way that I want it to. Dorian, I did not care about in the first book. I don't think I even mentioned my thoughts on him because I had no thoughts on him. I thought he was kind of bland and not like the most interesting love interest. I really didn't care about the love triangle. I just wanted to learn more about the world. In this book, he did get a little more interesting because we learned that he has magic and he shouldn't have magic because magic disappeared from the world 10 years ago, and it seems like the king was responsible in some way. I wonder whether the king isn't his biological father. That's why he has magic. I don't know. That is just a little theory that I had. The pivotal moment in this book is Nehemiah's death, and I knew that that was going to happen at some point in the series because I had been spoilt for it. I didn't know when it was going to happen, so in a way, because it happened this early on, it does give me more hope for the rest of the series. I really struggled to care about her or her and Celaena's relationship because I knew that it wasn't going to end well. It was going to end in heartbreak. So now when new characters are introduced, I feel like I'm not going to have that block in my brain. I am really proud of myself for guessing that Celaena and Aelin are the same person. I saw that come in as soon as her name was mentioned. I thought, okay, here we go. I obviously didn't know at that point who Aelin was. Like before her name was mentioned, I didn't know that she was the heir of Terrason, but it makes complete sense now, and I am assuming that the rest of the series is going to follow our main character, who I'm guessing we're now calling Aelin. She's gone off to Wendlin, which is the last Fae stronghold, and I'm assuming that she's going to find her allies and she's going to go up against the king and try and take him down and reclaim her birthright. Okay, I am running out of memory on my memory card, so I will be right back. I don't think there was actually that much more I needed to say about this book. I feel like I learned a lot about the world in this book. We learned about these keys that can open the realms, and that is potentially what's enabling the king to become so powerful, but I'm sure more will be revealed as I go through the series. I think I am going to pick up Assassin's Blade next because there were some characters in this who Celaena seemed to know from her previous life as an assassin, and I feel like it'll give more context. So I will read that next and I will check in with you when I have some thoughts on it. I have now read the first 2 short stories in the Assassin's Blade. I don't think I'm going to check in with you after every short story. In fact, I might wait until the end before I give you some final thoughts, but just to check in with how I'm feeling right now, I think that this is a better introduction to Celaena as a main character than Throne of Glass. I did not like Celaena in Throne of Glass. I found her really abrasive. However, because this is following the events that led to Celaena being who she is in Throne of Glass, I feel like I'm understanding her a lot more, and even though she's still arrogant, she is a lot more likable. We're seeing more of her caring side. The first short story in this, which I believe is called The Assassin and the Pirate Lord, something like that, she's sent on this mission by the head of the Assassin's Guild to negotiate with this pirate lord because her boss, who's called Aberin Hamel, he wants to get into the slave trade, which Celaena is morally against. She does not want to do this, and so she sabotages this plan. Her and her friend Sam end up freeing these slaves, and then in the second short story we see that there are consequences to this, and she's being sent to the desert to train for, I think it's a month, as punishment. During that second short story though, we see Celaena help this barmaid realise her potential as a healer, and she encourages her to go after that dream. So I am seeing why this might be recommended more to read first. In the box set that I've got, this is the first book, and so I'm assuming it's the one that the publisher wants people to read first, even though this came out, I believe, the same year as Heir of Fire. We'll let you know if my thoughts change once I'm at the end, but so far the only thing I'm struggling with is I don't really care that much about Sam as a main character because I already know what happens to him because I've read Throne of Glass. So maybe that's another reason to read this first, because if you don't know what happens to him, then maybe you'd have more of an emotional connection to his and Sam and Selena's relationship. Okay, so I have now finished The Assassin's Blade. I think I'm going to give this 4 stars. I did really enjoy these short stories. However, this wasn't what I was expecting. For some reason, I thought that this was going to start way back in Selena's childhood when she's first brought to the Assassin's Guild, and I thought we were going to see her training, and then each short story would maybe show a different point in her life, so we would skip forward a few years. I don't know whether what I'm about to say is going to be controversial because I haven't looked too much into it. I feel like I would have enjoyed this a lot more if I'd read it first before Throne of Glass. When I was doing research, to be fair, most places were saying that you could read this at any point in the series, but the 3 most popular ways that I saw of reading Assassin's Blade is to read it in chronological order, so read it first, to read it after Crown of Midnight if you want the biggest emotional impact, or to read it after Heir of Fire if you are more interested in the romantic elements. So I decided to read it after Crown of Midnight because I thought that that would be the best route for me, because I am more of an emotional reader, and I thought I want this to have the biggest emotional impact. I feel like this would have had more of an emotional impact on me if I'd read it first. The events of this book are leading up to Selena's capture and Sam's death, and I already know that he's going to die because I've read the first 2 books. I feel like this humanises Selena a lot more than Throne of Glass does. In Throne of Glass, she comes across as very arrogant and abrasive, and to be fair, I understand now why. I feel like in the first book, we are told that she's grieving and we're told that she's been through a lot of trauma, whereas in this, we actually get to experience that with her, and I do think that I would have liked Selena more. I think I would have warmed up to her quicker if I had read this first. The only thing that's revealed at the end of this book is that it's Aberyn who is responsible for Sam's death and Selena's capture. However, I feel like that was kind of obvious. Selena is convinced that it couldn't have possibly been Aberyn, and we do see their toxic relationship throughout this book. Like, he is awful to her, but because she feels like she owes him for saving her when she was a child, she does feel this loyalty to him. She's kind of living in denial that he could possibly do this to her, and yeah, I'm going to be really interested to see how Aberyn comes back into the story, because I'm assuming that he is at some point going to play a bigger part. I'm going to assume that that is why a lot of people recommend reading this earlier in the series rather than later, because I'm assuming that Aberyn is going to come back. I had so many thoughts about this book while I was reading it, and now I've sat down to film, I've forgotten all of them. But yeah, there is a lot of foreshadowing, I think, throughout these short stories, and maybe I wouldn't have picked up on certain things if I had read this first. For example, it talks at a few occasions about Selena's past and where she came from. It doesn't actually reveal anything, so it doesn't spoil that final twist at the end of Crown of Midnight. I really liked the 3rd story in this, where she's in the desert and she meets that girl Ansel, who has also come from a country, a place that's been destroyed by the king. However, Ansel decides to go down a very different route to revenge, and she decides to betray these assassins in the desert, and Selena obviously lets her go free in the end. Well, I don't know whether she lets her go free, but she does end up going free, and I wonder whether we are going to meet Ansel later on in the series as well. Knowing that Selena is the heir to Terrasun does put a different spin on that situation, so I can see both sides and I can understand why people recommend reading this at certain points. I will be really interested actually after Heir of Fire to see whether I recommend reading this after that instead, but no, at this point I feel like reading this first would have been the best option for me. I am very sensitive to spoilers, and this entire book is building up to Sam's death, which I already knew about, and so it took away a lot of that anticipation, and it meant that I wasn't shocked when it happened. Something else I picked up on is that there's a point where we see Aberyn twirling or playing with a ring, and that's something in the first 2 books that we kind of see, is that the king is potentially controlling people with jewelry, or there's something going on there, and so I wonder whether that is what's happening. Maybe Aberyn wasn't in control when he betrayed Selena. I don't know, know, that's just another theory that I have. Overall, it was great to see some other places outside of Rifthold. Like I said, I really enjoyed that third story where we're in the desert, and it's made me very excited for Heir of Fire because I know that Selena is currently on a boat on her way off to the land of the Fae. So yeah, I am glad that I read this. I think this is actually my favourite instalment in the Throne of Glass series so far. We'll see if I change my mind after Heir of Fire, but yeah, I am glad that I read this. I think I just would have enjoyed it more if I'd read it first, but at least if I ever reread the series, then I know now to start with this one, and I think it would be a very different experience. I am 200 pages into Heir of Fire, which seems like a really good point to pause and share with you my initial thoughts and feelings because I am really liking this so far. I think this has potential to be my favourite book in the series so far, and I know that I said that about Assassin's Blade, but I really mean it with this book. It feels like it's had quite a slow build-up, similar to Crown of Midnight. However, with Crown of Midnight, I was kind of bored because I felt like I was just waiting for stuff to happen. Things were really dragging. However, in this, we've got a lot of moving parts. We've got new characters being introduced, and I feel like the world is expanding. Selena is off in Wendlin. She is training with this guy, Rowan, who I believe is going to be another love interest. What I like about their dynamic so far is they don't like each other. They are not even thinking about each other in a romantic way. Rowan has actually said some quite mean stuff to her. What was it that he said? It was something like, you would have been more useful if you died 10 years ago, which, wow, that was like very rude. He did end up saving her from the skinwalkers, which has redeemed him slightly, but I really like how currently their dynamic isn't romantic, and so I feel like it's going to feel even more satisfying to see their dynamic change and their relationship build, if that is what's going to happen, but I'm fairly sure that that is the direction that this is going. It's also been really good to see Selena process everything that happened in Crown of Midnight. I feel like we are getting a lot more emotional depth from her. She was feeling very sorry for herself at the start, and there's been parts where she's talked about how she hates herself. I think it is just giving her more depth, and we're seeing her grow, which is really satisfying to read. The other main character that we've been introduced to is Manon, who is a witch, and the witches have been recruited by the king in order to fly this new wyvern army that he's developed. And initially I wasn't sure on her chapters. I found them a little bit boring because I was thinking, why am I meant to care about these witches? However, now that Abraxas has been introduced, I am a lot more interested. I really liked that chapter. I really liked how that subverted my expectations, and I feel like Manon is going to be quite a complex character because at the moment she seems to be on the side of the king, but she does seem like the kind of character who would easily betray him in order to further her own agenda. So most of the perspectives in this now I am enjoying. We've also been introduced to a healer called Sorsha, who is working in the castle, and she seems to have this infatuation with Dorian. I don't know how to pronounce this name, but Adian, Selena's cousin, has also joined the mix, and he initially is presented as this person who's very loyal to the king. He is currently in charge of Terrasun. I don't know what his title is. I think he's a general. Initially, he is presented as being one type of person, but now we're learning that he's actually very loyal to Selena or Aelin. One of my favourite scenes actually was where Chaol followed Adian and learned that he was collaborating with this rebel group. I thought that scene was really tense, and yeah, there has been some really standout moments so far throughout this book. I will try and check in with you before I get to the end because I'm not quite halfway through yet, so I might read another 100 or so pages today and then check in with you tomorrow. It is currently New Year's Eve, just to give some context. I was hoping to finish this before 2025, but I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think I have any hope of reading 300 pages before the end of the day. It is time for another update on Heir of Fire because I am now over halfway through this. I'm at the end of part 1, which means I have about 250 pages left. I feel like my thoughts on this series have been all over the place. I keep forgetting what I have and haven't said to the vlog, but I think one of the big reveals that I forgot to talk about at the end of Crown of Midnight is that Selena is part Fae, so it's been really interesting in this book learning more about the Fae and learning about their politics, how there seems to be some prejudice against people who are demi-Fae. Selena is grappling with her powers and trying to learn how to, first of all, use them, but also control them, which she is struggling with because she has this trauma associated with her power ever since she was a child, or when she was growing up. Her parents taught her to fear this power. I don't know whether I'm looking too much into this, but there was a point where Selena was thinking about the Terrasen Fae and how when magic disappeared from the world, the Fae were trapped in whatever form they had taken at that time. So Selena, well, all Fae have two forms. They have their Fae form and their animal form. Selena's animal form just so happens to be a human body. I wonder whether that is foreshadowing and whether at some point we're going to come across an animal who turns out to be a Fae. I don't think we've met any animals that could be Fae. Selena does have a dog, but I'm fairly sure the dog was a puppy when she got him, so that's probably not going to be a thing. I'm probably looking into that way too closely, but it's been fun learning more about different aspects of the world and the magic. The chapter that I just read, they came across this creature that's trapped in this lake under this mountain, and Selena was speculating whether this creature came from the other side because they found this sword and this ring next to this lake. There's something in Wendlin that is killing people, and Selena can smell that it has this scent of the other side. The way that the world is being built up and the way that the magic is being developed, we're having these little bits added gradually and it's forming this picture, but I don't have the full picture yet. There was also a point where I was very confused because Chaol is becoming more and more entwined with this rebel group, and there was a point where he went to Selena's old apartment and he was thinking about how it was Aberin who betrayed Selena and was the reason she was sent to prison. I didn't think that the characters had that information yet. Maybe I've just completely missed it, but I thought that was one of the big reveals at the end of Assassin's Blade. Maybe Selena had been stewing on her feelings while she was in prison and she had come to this conclusion herself, and so it wasn't treated as like a big reveal before Assassin's Blade. So maybe that is just me and my terrible memory, but yeah, Chaol was thinking about how Selena hasn't shown any interest yet in going after revenge. Going after Aberon is what I'm trying to say, and I'm wondering again whether that is something that is going to happen. It does make me look back on Assassin's Blade differently because that was the one big reveal that I thought we had in that book, and now I am even more convinced that I should have read Assassin's Blade first. But we're going to stop talking about that because it's too late now. We're just going to concentrate on the rest of this series, and yeah, I will hopefully blast through the remaining 200 pages tonight and let you know my final thoughts once I finish this. Before we get into my final thoughts on Heir of Fire, I need to tell you something. There is one thing that I sometimes come across in sci-fi and fantasy that really makes me feel physically sick, and that is when a character is in control of their own body. Possession stories, things like that. So I was not having a good time when I got to the end of this book. I don't know whether Dorian's mind is now completely lost or whether we're going to be able to get him back, but that whole scene when I realised what was happening, I don't want to talk about it, it was not good. However, in spite of all that, I'm giving this 5 stars because the emotions were emotionaling. I don't even know what word I was trying to use there, but my emotions were all over the place. I think I prefer Rowan over Chaol. I never felt fully invested in Selena and Chaol's relationship anyway, but I think that Selena and Rowan had really good chemistry in this, and I can see potential for me really liking their relationship. Obviously, I don't know what is to come. I still think that Chaol is an interesting character. He did start to grate on me in this book, and I found it a little bit frustrating how he wouldn't pick a side, even though I think that is kind of understandable. When you've grown up always believing something, when you find out that maybe you're not on the right side, even though it should have been obvious to you, I think exploring that in fiction is really interesting. So I still don't hate Chaol. However, I did start to find him a bit frustrating. In terms of my predictions for the next book, I think that Aelin is going to try and rescue Adian. Oh, I really hope he doesn't end up being possessed by a Varg either, because the Vargs just creep me out. I assumed at some point in this series we were going to see Selena try and break free the slaves from Endovia, but now we know that that's possibly not going to happen because the king killed them all. I was not expecting that to happen. Sorcerer's character turned out to be a spy, which didn't shock me. I didn't quite see it coming. in, but I think it was very heavily implied that there was something going on there. Oh, something else that I found really interesting is at one point in Manon's POV, it mentioned a Red Queen who is now ruling the desert lands, or the witch's former home, and I think that's the character who we met in Assassin's Blade, Selena's friend who ended up betraying her. I think that's her. If I'm remembering, she did have red hair, so I think at some point Manon is gonna go and try and reclaim her homeland. I did start to really like Manon's perspective in this book. I think we are going to see her soften because she's still very stubbornly hard at the moment. She is still insistent that she doesn't have a heart and that she's ruthless, and I think we are going to start to see that icy facade melt at some point. But yeah, overall, this is now one of my favourite Sarah J Maas books. I don't think anything is going to overtake A Court of Mist and Fury, but I enjoyed this so much and I really want to pick up the next book now, but I'm going to wait a few weeks because I'm feeling like I have a bit of a book hangover after finishing this. It was quite intense, that ending, especially with everything that was going on. So I'm going to take a little bit of a break from this series and then I will come back to you once I've started Queen of Shadows, I think is the next book. I have made a start on Queen of Shadows. I am 100 pages in, so I've read the first 11 chapters and already I'm really enjoying this. Or am I? Because already this has made me feel very squeamish. I don't like that literally the opening chapter of this is inside Dorian's mind and we're seeing him wrestle with this Varg prince that has overtaken him, and I hate it. It gives me the shivers. It makes me feel physically ill. But I can get past that as long as it's not too much. We've had 2 chapters from his perspective so far. We've seen Aelin reunite with Chaol, and I feel like that whole situation was a little anticlimactic. I think I was expecting something a bit more there, but again, we'll see how their dynamic is throughout the rest of the book. I'm assuming that the plot for this is going to be to do with rescuing Aelin's cousin who has been imprisoned by the king, but I don't know whether that's going to take the entire book. I'm very curious as to whether Rowan is going to appear in this book because he is currently back in Wendlin. At some point in these next few books, I'm assuming that we're going to try and restore magic to the world, and the way that Aelin is going to do that is by taking down the tower in Rifthold. Maybe not, maybe someone is going to travel to one of the other towers. Maybe they have to take down all the towers. I don't know, but all I know so far based on these first 100 pages is that I don't like Dorian's chapters because they make me feel ill, but I am intrigued to see how we are gonna rescue Adrian. Hopefully this is gonna have some kind of heist plot. I mean, I don't know whether heist is the right word, but I like seeing characters pull off some kind of quest, if that is the right word. In Manon's perspective, we've also been reintroduced to Duke Perrington and Caltaine from the first book. I don't think we've actually seen them since the first book, or maybe the start of the second book, but again, very intrigued because obviously there must be a reason why we have these characters in the book. Caltaine was quite a prominent character in the first book, and I think she has a collar, not a ring, but she is being controlled, and it seemed like, I don't know, I don't think she's been possessed by a prince. Maybe she's being possessed by a queen from this other realm. I don't know, I'm just speculating right now, but yeah, I'm very intrigued about Manon's chapters because her chapters initially, when I first was introduced to her character, I wasn't that keen on her, but I think that it's going to be interesting having those breaks where we're seeing another part of the world other than Rifthold. This does have 2 parts, so I think the next time I check in with you is going to be at the end of part 1. I'm hoping that we are going to get lots of action and scheming and all of that good stuff in this book. I've heard a lot of people say that this is one of their favourite books in the series, so we will see how it goes. I can't remember if I said I was going to update you at the halfway point or when I was at the end of part 1, because part 1 is slightly past the halfway point and I'm currently on page 318, so roughly halfway through, and I have some thoughts. So first of all, why is Sarah J Maas so determined to give me the ick? Not only are we having to read chapters told from Dorian's perspective, now we also have some kind of weird breeding experimentation situation going on with the witches, and I don't like it. We don't actually know what's happened there because at the part that I'm at, Manon has been told that the experiment was a success, but we don't actually know what that means. So she's asked Elide, I think is her name, to break into this room and find out. Elide is an interesting character. I'm fairly sure she was actually mentioned at the end of the last book when Selena had that flashback to when she was saved, when she escaped Terrasun, and I think the woman who helped Aelin escape was Elide's mom. That's what I think. So it's going to be interesting because Elide has witch blood in her and I don't quite know what that means. Although it has been discussed how the witches came about because the Fae mated with the Valg. I don't think we were told that up until that point, or if we were then I'd forgotten about it. So yeah, really interested in what's going on with Manon's POV, and I think I said this earlier, I like how it's breaking up the chapters told in Rifthold. Speaking of Rifthold, the quest to save Adian has already happened. That happened by about 30% of the way through, and I wasn't expecting it to be that quick. I was expecting that to span a much longer period of time, but Adian has been saved. Rowan has also showed up, and Selena, well, I keep calling her Selena, Aelin and Chaol keep arguing over what to do about Dorian, because when Aelin rescued Adian, there was this scene in the garden where she was battling this Valg who has taken over Dorian's body, and yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. I feel like I think we've reached a point with Dorian's character where there's nothing else that he can do. We've already seen him move past his relationship with Selena and he met someone else, but she's died, and now he's going through this obviously traumatic experience, and it's not that I want him to die, I just don't know where we can really go with his character after this. Even if Aelin and Chaol are able to save him, I don't know whether there's much else that he can do in terms of the story and progressing the story. I mean, I suppose he is the heir to the throne, so there's that. I think he is going to be saved. I think that someone, maybe Chaol, is going to capture him against Aelin's wishes, and maybe at some point they're going to manage to break him out of his mind. But yeah, that's just me speculating, obviously. I am enjoying this book. I think there's a lot going on. Rowan has turned up. Did I mention that already? I think I might have. Wasn't expecting that to happen, especially not as early as it did. I thought maybe he would rock up at the end of the book and we would have a moment. But yeah, he is back, which is cool because he is one of my favourite characters. It is really strange actually seeing characters that you're so used to seeing in one setting show up in another setting. Like Rowan in Rifthold is just weird. It's not what I'm used to. We've also found out that Lysandra is a shapeshifter, which is interesting. I didn't see that come in. I think shapeshifters have been mentioned at some point. I think by the end of this book, magic is going to be freed, just based on how quickly we rescued Adian. And now there's this tense situation with Aelin and Aberin, where in exchange for helping her rescue Adian, he's asked her to capture a Valg that he can then, I don't know, experiment on. There's a lot of experimenting going on in this book and it is really creeping me out. But basically Aberin wanted a Valg but captured alive so he can, I guess, assess what's going on. But yeah, I think that once all of that's done, once Selena has the word key, I think that we're going to bring magic back to the world, and that is going to be the ending of this book. But yeah, I will let you know if I have any more thoughts before I get to the end. It's good so far though. I am liking this book. Am I liking it as much as the last book? Maybe. Before I forget, I also wanted to mention about Adian. I don't know whether this is just me, but there's something about him that is giving creepy vibes. I don't like how obsessed he seems to be with Aelin. Also not a fan of the weird alpha male bravado. It just makes me want to roll my eyes. I don't like it. But anyway, yeah, that was something else that I wanted to talk about. Also, just as a broad comment, we keep getting mentions of gods. So like we know that there are gods in this world. I haven't written down any names specifically, but every so often a character will mention like praying to a certain god or something like that, and I don't know who these gods are. I don't think anything like that has been explained to us, but maybe that will be explained at some point in another book. I have less than 200 pages left in Queen of Shadows, and I understand now why people say that you should read Assassin's Blade before this book. I think the general consensus is that you can read it at any point in the series, as long as it's before this book. And I understand that now, because if you don't have the context of the Assassin's Guild and Selena and Aberyn's relationship, then his death isn't going to have as much of an impact. If you've read that book, then it makes sense why Aelin chose Lysandra to be the one to kill him. So yeah, I understand now why people say that. We've also had a lot more information about the history of this world. So Elena and Gavin were the first king and queen of Adelan. We knew that from like the first book, I think. We also know that there was a demon war between humans, Fae, and the Valg. We knew that the Valg were banished back to their world. However, what we didn't know is that there were 3 Valg kings, and one of those kings was trapped in this world. They couldn't get rid of him permanently, so they buried him under the Black Mountains, which is Marath, and that is where the king has been sending his forces, where Manon is, and Duke Perrington. And it's really interesting because I think, so the characters, Aelin, Rowan and Chaol, they think that the king's plan is to raise this king. I wonder whether the king has already been taken over by a Val king, and that's what started this whole thing. I don't know whether that makes sense though, because the king does wear a ring, but I think in order to imprison him and like put a Val king in him, then he'd have to wear collar, and he's not. We also had one chapter from Caltain's point of view, which was very intriguing because she was describing how the Valg prince invaded, took over her body. However, her fire magic started to come back to her, and she was gradually able to take back control. And I wonder whether that was foreshadowing for what's about to happen, because I am pretty confident that Aelin at the end of this book is going to free magic, and I wonder whether when people like Dorian get their magic back, whether that means that they're going to be able to expel the Valg who have taken over them. But maybe the king isn't going to notice, and so Dorian is going to turn spy. I don't know. That is just one of my theories. But yeah, the part that I'm at now is going to be really tense because all of the characters are going to be together for the first time. Lysandra has been taken by the king, so Aelin is putting together a plan to try and rescue her. They're all going to this meeting that the king has planned with Duke Perrington and Manon, so it's going to be really tense. That's why I wanted to check in with you before I read that, because yeah, I have a feeling this is going to be a really impactful ending. Sarah J. Maas knows how to write an explosive ending. That was really good. I think we needed that type of ending after the stressful cliffhanger of Heir of Fire. I think we needed a more hopeful ending. So yeah, I'm really happy with how things wrapped up in this book. I was right and I was also wrong about some things. So I was right, kind of, half right, about the king not being fully in control of himself. Didn't see it come in that it's actually Duke Perrington who has the Val king inside him. I would be really curious to go back and read the first book and see whether that was foreshadowed from that early on, because it didn't even occur to me until this book that the king might not be in control of himself. And yeah, I'm wondering whether that was Sarah J. Maas's plan all along, or whether she's just making it up as she goes. I don't think that's the case. I think there probably was clues in earlier books. I also didn't see it come in how Selena was going to free Dorian. Obviously, he now has the collar taken off him. I keep forgetting to mention Lorcan, but I think that in the last few books, Maeve and Lorcan and Rowan's friends, well, are they still his friends, his cadre? I wonder whether they're going to play a bigger part within the plot. It seemed to have been hinted at, especially when we learn that Adrian is actually Gavriel's son. Chaol has been injured and he is now going to be travelling south to find the healers in the southern continent, and he's taken Nesrin with him. From what I gather, the next 2 books run side by side, or you can read them side by side because the events happen at the same time. I don't think I'm going to do that. Like, I'm not going to do a tandem read on my first read through because I feel like that would be a little too intimidating, but I know that you can do that. I'm starting to wonder whether the reason that people hate Chaol is not so much that they hate Chaol, it's that they hate Tower of Dawn. I've heard that the next book ends on a massive cliffhanger, and so if you were reading the series as it came out, maybe it was really frustrating to then have to read Tower of Dawn before getting to the finale. Still love the tension between Aelin and Rowan. I am so invested in their romance. However, I'm also really thankful that there are hints of other romances that are building. We've had hints that maybe there's something that's going to happen between Dorian and Manon. Manon. Chaol and Nesrin also, I'm assuming, are going to become a thing. And also, I was picking up on some vibes between Adian and Lysandra, but again, I don't know whether that's just me. I find it really interesting how Manon and Chaol seem to be having very similar character arcs. They're both people who have always bowed down to authority and never really questioned what their orders are, whereas now they're breaking away from that. And I'm really interested actually to see how Manon's character develops in these last few books, whether her and Aelin are going to become like firm allies or whether it's going to be like reluctant allies because they're both working towards a similar goal. But anyway, I'm going to stop rambling because this vlog is already quite long, and I think when I double checked, I'm halfway through the series in terms of page count, and the next 3 books are quite chunky, so it's going to take me a while to get through them. I last night started Empire of Storms, which is book 5, 6 in the Throne of Glass series. I think it's book 6 because there's 8 books in total and we have 3 left. So yes, I was right. I started this last night. I read the first 50 pages and already I have some stuff I want to talk about. Not so much about this particular book, more my predictions for the rest of this series. It's very clear that we're building up to this battle against the Val King, who interestingly is now occupying a different body to Duke Perrington. I think that battle is going to happen in Kingdom of Ash. So I think in this, there's going to be a lot of character development and relationship building, and we're going to be maneuvering characters so that they're in a position ready for the final battle. I don't think we're going to get the final battle in this book. I think it's going to be more relationship focused, and I think we're going to see more development of Aelin and Rowan's relationship, as well as a few others, because there is something I think that's going to happen between Lysandra and Adian. Also, Manon and Dorian, that was something else that I picked up on in the last book. I think that they are also going to have some sort of relationship. Manon and the rest of the witches, not all of them, but some of them, are being sent to Rifthold to try and take back the city. I don't know whether they're going to be successful. I have 2 theories. I think either Manon is going to be captured and held by Dorian, or they are going to capture Rifthold and Dorian is going to be taken, but I think something is going to happen to push Manon and Dorian together. I think there's also a lot that could be done with Lysandra's character, because we know that she's a shapeshifter and she can shapeshift into humans, so I wonder whether she's going to become like a spy and potentially take on someone else's identity in order to manipulate events. That is another little theory that I had. A lead, I think, is also going to become a more prominent character because the very first chapter, I think, after the prologue, was following her, and she also is on her way anyway to find Aelin and give her the word stone or the word key. Forgetting the terminology, but Kaltain gave her this word stone or key at the end of the last book, and so she's trying to deliver it to Aelin, who she doesn't realise is actually Selena. Lorcan, who is May's right-hand man, is also currently following her, and he at this point still believes that he has one of the word keys or 2 of them. He has no idea that the word stone that Aelin gave to him is a fake. So again, I'm wondering how that situation is going to play out. But that's all I have to say right now. Just wanted to check in and let you know that I have started this. I don't know when I'm next going to check in with you. I haven't checked if this is split into sections. We'll see, because I'm very aware of how long this video is probably going to be, and I don't want it to become boring. I don't want to find myself repeating stuff. So I will check in with you once I feel like I have some stuff to say about this. The thing about filming this vlog over a long period of time is I can see how quickly my hair is growing, and I am in need of a haircut. You are probably going to see me with short hair again before the end of this vlog. But in terms of reading updates, I have read another 200 pages in Empire of Storms, and I'm liking this, but I feel like a lot has happened within those first 250 pages. For example, we got the attack on Rifthold, which seemed to be over within the space of a chapter. I was wrong about some things. Dorian managed to get away thanks to Rowan. Manon also kind of allowed him to escape, and we managed to see Rowan and Dorian's relationship develop, if you can call it a relationship. Their dynamic was something I didn't know I needed to see, and it was quite cute. Aelin has been rejected as queen by the Lords of Terrason, which I think is kind of understandable. Aelin did eventually acknowledge that they made the right decision, but I don't know whether as the reader we are also meant to agree with their decision or be on her side. But what kind of lords would they be if they just bowed down to her and said, yep, sure, you can take over, we will follow you into whatever you want to do? Like, that just wouldn't have been realistic, in my opinion. That is an interesting development. Also, Brannon appeared to Aelin and advised her to find the lock to go with the word keys. So that is basically what we're going to be doing in this book. Manon's perspective so far is my favourite because, oh my goodness, that scene where we thought, is her name Asterin, her second, when we thought that she was going to die. This is why I love Manon's character, because she feels so unpredictable, and yet whatever choice she makes, it makes sense because her personality is so erratic, and she's been portrayed as someone who is very like hard as nails and ruthless. In that moment, I thought she was actually going to let it happen, and then when it didn't happen and she turned around and attacked her grandmother instead, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like so good, so good. And yeah, I am still really enjoying her relationship with Abraxas. Who would have thought that Manon would end up being one of my favourite characters? So yeah, I am enjoying this so far. Something is also brewing with Maeve, and she seems to be heading towards Islewey. I don't know if I've pronounced that right, but Maeve is also joining this war in some way, and we don't think she's going to be an ally, but Rowan's cadre do seem to be helping them for now. Lysandra is another one of my favourite characters because she has such a complex backstory, and I'm starting to think her relationship with Adian is quite cute, but obviously she has these barriers, which is completely understandable, and he seems to be respectful of that. There's something about seeing characters process their trauma and finding someone who is respectful of what they've been through. This is going well so far. I am going to continue at my current pace, which is around 100 pages per day, which means I'm on track to finish this by the weekend. Why is it whenever I hear people talking about the Throne of Glass series, I hear people mention Aelin and Rowan and Chaol and Dorian and Manon, all of those names, but I had never heard of Lysandra before reading the series myself, and she's such a good character. I'm at the end of part 1, so I've just read the big battle at Skull Island. Really hoping I'm getting the place names right, but basically they were attacked by an army of Valg, and there was also these sea wyverns that Lysandra was fighting against. She has such a cool power. I think her magical ability is the coolest out of the entire group. I'm also starting to feel really invested in her and Adian's relationship, and I'm nervous that she's gonna die. I'm nervous that I'm gonna have my heart broken by the end of this book. At the moment, I feel like she's got a bit of plot armor. Like, that part that I just read, that battle, was really good and it felt really tense, but I had a feeling that nothing bad was gonna happen. Obviously, she was severely injured. I knew that nothing was gonna happen when we still haven't got this romance between her and Adian, so I'm nervous, okay? I'm nervous that someone is gonna die in this book, and I'm gonna be really upset. The chapter ended with Abraxas bringing Manon to the group because she is severely injured. I had a feeling, even when Manon was introduced, maybe because I've heard people talk about Manon, I had a feeling that she wasn't going to be evil and rotten to the core. Like, that was just not going to happen. So now my theory might come true, because I definitely caught a vibe between her and Dorian in the last book, and I don't know whether I'm that invested in them. We'll see. First of all, we'll see if I'm right. We'll see if that does actually develop. But I feel like Dorian he just feels a little bit pointless at the moment. He's not really doing anything. He has this magical ice ability, but I mean, he just feels like a bit of a spare part compared to the other people. Like, obviously he is the king, and so he's still relevant. I don't know whether I need another Dorian romance, so we will see. I might be wrong. I might just be chatting rubbish, but we'll see. I have less than half the book to go, so if anything dramatic happens before the end, then I will catch up with you. But feeling very good about this. I think the crew are about to head down to Iowa. We've heard that Erewhon, is that his name? The Valg King? Yes, Erewhon. He is on his way to invade Iowa, and I think Aelin is going to try and prevent that from happening. I decided to go ahead and finish Empire of Storms in what was essentially one sitting yesterday. I sat and blasted through the last 250 to 300 pages, and I have some very mixed feelings. I generally don't mind how this is becoming more of a romance-focused series. I was prepared for that, and I do find the way that Sarah J. Maas writes romance is really addictive for me. That's how I was able to read 300 pages in one sitting. Also, there was quite a lot of action in this, so it felt like that broke up the pace, and we had the action moments, we then had some quieter, slower moments with the characters, and there are some side characters that I'm really invested in. Lorcan and Alide, I loved their dynamic. I'm really interested to see how that develops. Also, Adian and Lysandra, I now have some issues with, which we're gonna come on to. Dorian felt like a completely different character in this, and I understand that he's been through something incredibly traumatic, so that can obviously change a person. I've always pictured him as being this cheeky chappy kind of person. We're told in the first few books that he's a bit of a womanizer, so it's not completely unbelievable that he would go for Manon. Like, the justification behind why he likes her, I mean, she is incredibly beautiful, so I get it, right? I get why Dorian might be interested in Manon. However, I also felt like he was being turned into this alpha male character in this book, and I didn't find that believable. I also don't understand why Manon likes Dorian. Up until this point, she had shown no interest in being romantically involved with anyone. If she was going to have a romance, I would have personally preferred for it to be with Astrid, her second in command, because I felt like they had really great chemistry, and that, I think, would have been a good progression of their relationship. I would have been on board with that. I would have been excited about that. There were some interesting reveals in this, how either Aelin or Dorian has to sacrifice themselves in order to rebuild the lock and send the Valg back to where they came from, or at least out of this world. That final confrontation with Maeve on the beach I thought was very intense, although because a lot of these relationships were quite new, I never really felt like anyone was going to die, and I was expecting there to be a lot of death at the end of this book. The biggest issue that I had with this book was Aelin and the scheming and the deception, and how she was holding so much back from people that she's supposed to trust. When it's revealed that her and Lysandra had come up with this plan where Lysandra was going to take on Aelin's identity and continue, like, you know, deceiving the rest of the world, Adian was such a big part of that plan, and I didn't like how they didn't consult him and they didn't speak to him about it. I think he has every right to be annoyed. I had to read that part a couple of times because initially I thought that they hadn't even told Rowan what was going to happen, but I think he was in on the plan. It's all a little bit confusing, but I didn't like how there was so much going on in the background that we were just not told as the reader, and then it was like, surprise! Aelin this whole time has been planning stuff in the background. And even when Ansel showed up, that to me just felt a little bit convenient. I do actually like the here comes the cavalry trope, but we had it twice in this book. First with Ansel, and then again with the 13. Where we left off with this book, I am excited to eventually get to Kingdom of Ash. I know that Tower of Dawn follows Chaol and Nesrin and a whole load of other characters. I think I actually need that because of how intense the ending to this was. I think that reading Tower of Dawn is going to allow me time to process my thoughts properly on the ending of this. Also, I like Chaol. I missed Chaol in this book. So I think reading Tower of Dawn is going to help reset me and prepare me for the final installment. The characters are splitting up and going off in different groups. Manon and Dorian are going to try and find the Cochrane witches and enlist them to help Aelin. Lysandra and Adian are going off back to Terrason, and then Rowan and his cadre are going to save save Aelin from Maeve. I am still enjoying the series, however, I think I'm enjoying it more now for the side characters rather than the main couple. I am not a fan of the fated mates trope. I quite liked how in this series it seemed to be subverting our expectations, how Aelin and Rowan had both loved other people previously and they were still able to find each other and develop this romance. I really liked that, and so for it to be revealed in this book that Maeve was manipulating things the whole time, I didn't like that. That's just a personal thing. I am not a fan of fated mates. I like characters having agency and having control over their own decisions and their own love lives. I don't like it when things are just laid out for them and they are destined to be together. That, like I said, is just a personal thing. I think that is actually everything that I needed to tell you about this book. So I'm going to wrap things up for this clip and I will check in with you next once I start Tower of Dawn, which is probably going to be in a few weeks' time. I have now made a start on Tower of Dawn. I read the first 90 pages yesterday evening and I don't know what this book is going to be about. I mean, I'm assuming the plot is going to be Chaol and Nesryn trying to convince the southern continent to help out in the war back home. I'm assuming that's what the plot is going to be. And then we also have this healers guild called the Torah Kesmi. We've been introduced to a character called Irene who has been tasked with healing Chaol. Is that all that is going to happen in this book? I mean, I'm okay with that because I love politics in fantasy. I also like romance and Chaol is one of my favourite characters in this series. I like as well how we're getting more callbacks to Assassin's Blade. Irene was a character in one of those short stories and yeah, it's nice seeing characters come back into the story that we'd only briefly met previously. If this is just a romance, then I am okay with that. Like, I enjoyed those first 90 pages. I was shocked yesterday when I realised how much I'd read. Also, I quite like Nesryn as a character. She is from the southern continent and so I'm interested to see how that is going to play in the story because she's already been to see family, but that happened off page. Like, she went away and then Chaol was worried about her for a few hours and then she came back. So we as the reader don't know what happened there. Maybe we will find out in literally the next chapter. Maybe we won't. Maybe some stuff is going on in the background because based on the last book, we know that Sarah J Maas likes to do that and I don't like it. I don't want information to be kept from me, but yeah, we'll see how it goes with this book. I just wanted to let you know that I have now started it and I've enjoyed the setup so far. I am now about 260 pages into Tower of Dawn, and how did I forget to mention that there is a mystery in this book? It's way more than a romance, although it does feel like the romance is pretty central to the plot, but we learned right at the beginning that one of the royal princesses died before the start of the book and we don't know whether it was murder. So Nesryn in particular is investigating whether the Valg have infiltrated the southern continent. It seems like Chaol and Nesryn are now going to separate and Nesryn is going to go with one of the princes who is in charge of the aerial army. Meanwhile, Chaol is going to stay behind and try and convince the leader of the southern continent to help with the war still. It's been a very slow developing plot so far, but I really like that. I want to feel invested in the romance. I can't remember whether I liked Chaol and Nesryn together in the previous books, but I like Chaol with anyone other than Aelin. This is making me realise that I do not like Aelin at all because I have not missed her in this book. I like Irene as a character and I think her and Chaol have an interesting friendship that's developing, but at this point I think Chaol and Nesryn are still kind of together. They have had a conversation, but it wasn't really a conversation, so I don't know whether that is now done. I mean, I'm assuming that Chaol and Irene are going to get together, but I want it to be cut off between Chaol and Nesryn first. Chaol is quite a stubborn character. He is the kind of person who insists that he's fine when he's clearly not, and it can be really irritating. I like what it said earlier about how in order to heal physically, you also have to heal mentally. It was something like that, and I do appreciate how this book feels like it isn't skimming over what Chaol has been through, because he's been through a lot. I mean, all of the characters in this series have been through a lot, and one thing that I did find a bit convenient in the last book is that Dorian doesn't remember a lot of what happened to him, and I wish that it had spent more time showing him process his trauma, because even if you don't remember something that you've been through, you would still have pretty strong feelings on it. I don't feel like we spent enough time seeing Dorian process his trauma, is what I'm trying to say. Have I even told you what page I'm on? I am up to page 265, so over a third of the way through, not quite halfway through, but yeah, I am enjoying this so far. I'm finding that when I'm reading it, I don't want to put it down. I am a little bit suspicious of the princess whose name I can't remember, but she's friends with Irene. I am really suspicious of her because she has essentially asked Irene to spy on Chaol and feed information back to her. In fact, Irene spoke to Chaol and said, "Can you give me something that I can tell her?" And he said, "Oh, say that Aelin is going to Skull Island because that's the last place that she would go to." And obviously we know that that is where I'm guessing at this point, that's where she is. When I come across things like that, it makes me realise why people say that you should tandem read this book and Empire of Storms. I'm guessing there's going to be other crossovers like that. But yeah, enjoying this so far. Will probably update you once I'm past the halfway point, but like I said, I'm reading this so quickly. It has been a long time since I've read any book as quickly as I'm reading Tower of Dawn. I only have about 150 pages left of this. I read so much yesterday. We're going through a bit of a heat wave in the UK at the moment, so I didn't really want to do anything yesterday. I just lay on the sofa reading this book, and the thing is, the plot in this isn't the strongest. It doesn't have the most plot compared to some of the other books, but I really like the characters in this. I like the new characters that have been introduced, apart from the characters that I don't think I'm meant to like. As I've discussed many times in this vlog, Chaol is one of my favourite characters, and I think the reason he's one of my favourite characters is because he feels the most humanly realistic to me. When I think of the other characters, some of them feel too perfect. Like Rowan comes to mind. I think that Rowan is someone who, yeah, maybe he's like messed up a little bit, but he feels too perfect to me. Aelin, I think, has made mistakes that in my mind are unforgivable, whereas Chaol, he makes mistakes, and you can understand why other characters wouldn't want to forgive him for those mistakes, or why they might have strong feelings about things that he's done. I think we're seeing, especially in this book, that he learns and he grows from his mistakes, and I really like characters that go through that kind of character growth. So yeah, I'm really liking this so far. I don't know if there's going to be any spice in this, because obviously there was spice in the last book, but I don't know about this one. We're getting some more information about how the Valg might have originated from the southern continent. Honestly, a lot of the stuff to do with the world, I'm finding it not confusing. I'm following everything, but I feel like there's bits of world building that are just kind of scattered throughout the books, and trying to piece it all together. It's not my favourite thing about the series, which is interesting for me to say, because usually I'm a very world building driven reader, if that's even a phrase. Like, I am usually someone who loves intricate world building in fantasy, but I don't feel like this is intricate world building. Sometimes it's hard for me to work out whether things are being conveniently changed to suit the narrative and the direction that the plot's going in, or whether I've just forgotten stuff from earlier books. I finished reading Tower of Dawn last night, and I'm giving it 5 stars. This is in the running to be my favourite Throne of Glass book. Maybe once I finish the series, I should do a little section at the end quickly ranking them, but I loved this. I understand some people don't like Chaol, and if Chaol is your least favourite character, then reading over 600 pages of his story is not going to appeal to you, but I loved this. I devoured this. I ate it up. It's ironic that in the last clip I said, I'm not sure if this is going to get spicy, and then I read the next chapter. I keep wanting to call her Irene, but I don't know whether it's pronounced Urine, but I think that Chaol and Irene's relationship was really well done. I loved Chaol's character arc in this. When it was revealed that Maeve is actually a Valg queen, that I did not see come in. My jaw literally dropped, and I just sat there staring at the page like, was that foreshadowed? It's ironic because I think in the last clip I was also saying that sometimes it feels like Sarah J Maas is making stuff up as she goes along, but I feel like that must have been foreshadowed because it references when Selena or Aelin first met Maeve, she had an owl with her, and we know that the owls are the symbol of the Torquesme, so that was a really cool moment. Also, I didn't see it come in that it was the youngest princess who had been infected by a Valg. I think the information that we got about how the Valgs are like a parasite, so the healers are able to heal them, I thought that was really interesting. There was also a point where I actually thought she might kill off Kale, and I was not doing okay. I was thinking, of all the characters that you could kill off in this series, you're gonna kill off my favourite. I mean, there's still another book to go, so, you know, who knows what's gonna happen. I do feel like the stakes as I've gone through the series, and I might have mentioned this already, but going into the last book, I want the stakes to feel high, and I want the characters to feel like they're in actual danger, because there's a war happening and it's unrealistic for everyone to survive it. So yeah, I am going to be going into the final book very, very soon. Sarah J Maas loves a character monologue, and I've noticed it in some of her other books, but in this one in particular, the number of times a character would spend paragraphs and paragraphs explaining stuff to other characters, and it did feel a little bit tedious. That's the only criticism I have. Otherwise, I loved this. I have made a start on Kingdom of Ash. I am 117 pages into this, so it felt like a good time to pause and give you some initial thoughts and feelings. However, my thoughts and feelings so far are going to sound negative, and I didn't want to open this part of the vlog by sharing negative thoughts, because this is the last book in a series and I have been enjoying this series so far. So I'm going to start with the positives. I am still very invested in the plot. I want to see how things wrap up with this war, and the scenes with Aelin where she's being tortured, those are horrific. I'm really interested to see how that resolves, whether she's going to save herself or whether she's going to be rescued. Individually, I still feel invested in these characters because there are so many POVs in this. Sometimes when that happens, I find myself getting to a chapter and thinking, oh no, we're following this person again. I've not had that feeling with this book. Every single POV, every single perspective I'm interested in. So as a whole, I'm invested in the book. However, what I'm finding is that a lot of the romantic relationships are starting to become a bit stale. For example, you have just heard me share my thoughts on Tower of Dawn, and I was talking about how much I loved Kale and Irene. A few chapters that we've got from them in this book so far, I found them a bit boring. As soon as characters get together and they seem happy and committed, I start to lose interest and I don't find them as interesting. I think I just love the tension and the build-up in a romance. That's why I read romance books. Manon and Dorian, I've already mentioned, I don't believe their relationship at all. I don't find they have good chemistry, so I don't care about their relationship. And then the two couples that I would be interested in, Alid and Lorcan, and Adian and Lysandra, they're not talking at the moment. They're annoyed at each other. So we're not really getting any banter or fun moments between them. I think that will change as we go through the book. So I just wanted to be honest with my thoughts and feelings so far. They are very mixed right now, but we'll see how I feel in another few hundred pages. I am not even a third of the way through this book. I am 274 pages in, and thankfully I am starting to enjoy it a little more. I think I was quite harsh in my first update and I just needed to give it time to really get into the plot. But the thing is that sometimes I find when I get to the last book in a series, I feel like I'm going through the motions because I feel like I already know what's gonna happen, and I don't feel like the stakes are that high going into this book. I don't truly believe that any of these characters are in danger. Maybe Gavriel or Fenris. I mean, the part that I've just read, Aelin has managed to escape, and there was a point where I thought that Fenris was in real trouble, but it didn't happen. So part of me does feel like I want it to get to the point quicker, but also I don't think I would want it to be faster paced. Yeah, I do still like these characters. I want to know how this book ends. I just want it to throw me a few curveballs, you know? I want it to go off in some directions that I'm not expecting. I want to be loving this as much as I've loved some of the other books, but you know, there's still time. Why is this book so long though? That is is the question that I have at the moment. Some parts have been quite tense though. For example, Adrian and Lysandra are currently at the border of Terrason and this army approaching. I mean, I think they've already had at least one battle. So I am feeling a little bit of tension and I'm wondering how are they going to get out of these situations. But I do want to feel just a little more, you know, but we'll see. I am gonna try and get through a big chunk of this today because it's currently a Saturday and I would like for this vlog to go live next Sunday. Do we think I can read 750-ish pages before next week? I mean, I could, because that's like 100 and something pages a day, and I can easily read more than that over this weekend, so I will keep you updated. I am almost at the halfway point in Kingdom of Ash. I'm also not sure if I am in focus. The lighting isn't that great today, but I wanted to update you because I would like the record to show that I am finally enjoying this book. Not that I was hating it before. I do want to clarify some stuff that I've already said about this particular book. I think I just needed to give it some time. I just needed to get into the story. I still stand by what I said about the stakes in this. We keep being told that either Aelin or Dorian is going to have to sacrifice themselves in order to save the world, and I'm not buying it. I don't think that's going to happen. Can you imagine if I'm wrong? But I am not convinced that we're going to have that kind of ending. I think the only kind of ending that we can have is a more hopeful one where the good guys win. Saying that, I do want to acknowledge that there are worse things that a character can go through other than death, and we've really seen that in this book. The trauma that these characters have been through, I can feel how down they are all feeling. When Aelin is looking at her body and she's seeing that her scars and her tattoos have disappeared because she was so severely tortured that the healers had to give her new skin, that was dark. These characters have been through so much, and I'm really feeling that in this book. The weight of the world is very much on their shoulders. When Manon is making her speech to the other witches and she's saying how just because they were turned into monsters, that doesn't mean that that has to be their destiny. They can break away from that. Loved that scene. Manon's character development and her character arc in general, I think, has been fantastic in this series. Loved that message around how you can break away from a pattern and you don't have to repeat what generations before you have done. The part that I'm at, Aelin has just reunited with Chaol and she recognised Irene, which I thought was a really sweet moment. Some of that did feel a little bit cheesy, I'm not gonna lie, but I ate it up. And ultimately, I do like these characters and I want to see what's going to happen to them. Or do I? Because I was convinced when I was reading Tower of Dawn that Chaol and Irene were going to be the couple that maybe wouldn't make it to the end of the series. Now that we've learned that Irene is pregnant, I don't think that Sarah J Maas is going to go there. I mean, she might, but I am feeling fairly confident that they're going to make it. And yeah, I am liking this book. I feel like I was quite negative in the beginning, but as I said, I just needed to give it time. Hard to believe that I'm not even halfway through though. I am going to try and get past the halfway point this evening, but it's going much better than it was in the beginning. I'm a little bit confused because I think Dorian has just made a deal with Maeve, and if that is legit, then in my opinion, that makes no sense. If he's not just telling her that, you know, to lull her into a false sense of security. I don't believe that he would ever do that after what happened to him. Why would he align with someone that he knows has tortured Aelin, who's supposed to be his friend? Need to keep on reading, obviously, to see how that unfolds, but that whole thing felt very rushed to me. Sarah J Maas almost got me earlier though, when Lorcan was dying on the battlefield and Elide was racing to try and get him to safety. I almost thought, okay, is this actually going to happen? Are they both going to die? But no, it was all fine in the end. That did feel very tense though, so yeah, I'm still enjoying this. I just have a few concerns over how things are going to play out, especially with Dorian. Would you believe me if I told you that this is the third time that I have had to film this update? But this is going to be my final update before I finish Kingdom of Ash. I am on page 720, so I have about 280 pages left, and that feels like a whole book that I still need to read. However, the point that I'm at now, the battle that we've been building up to throughout this entire series has finally started. So I know that when I settle down to read this tonight, I'm not going to want to put it down in order to update the vlog, so I might as well tell you my thoughts now, and then the next time I speak to you I will have finished this. Manon and the Crocken witches have just arrived in Terrason in order to join this battle. I was also wrong about Dorian, or was I? Because it felt like Sarah J Maas was trying to convince us that this was actually feasible and that he might actually ally with Maeve. I never believed it. I didn't think it was at all realistic, and it turned out he was just using her in order to get the final word key, which he's now bringing to Terrason. I'm a little confused about how the shape-shifting magic works in this world, and I think I just need to put it out of my brain, but it's annoying me because Dorian, when he shapeshifts into an animal, when he then shifts back into a human, he's still fully clothed and he even has his sword still with him, whereas that doesn't seem to be the case with Lysandra. I don't know whether it has been explained at some point and I've just missed it, but yeah. I'm also starting to think that Gavriel potentially isn't going to make it to the end, because there was a conversation that he had with Chaol where he was sharing all of his regrets with regards to Aedion, how he missed out on being a father, and because he's not that attached to many people, I think that maybe he's going to reunite with Aedion, but it's going to be in a way where he's saving his life, for example, or sacrificing himself for him. Something else that's come up a couple of times is Aylin's affinity with water. So we know that her main magical power is fire, but she also inherited a small bit of water magic from her mom, and it's been mentioned enough times that I'm noticing it, and I'm wondering whether that is going to be important. We will see. If it's not, then I don't know why that would have been mentioned. This book does feel too long in my opinion, but we're almost there. I'm on the final stretch, and yeah, I guess I will chat with you once I finish this. I'm so excited. I can't believe I'm about to say this, but it is almost time to wrap up this vlog because I have now finished the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J Maas. I finished Kingdom of Ash last night, and I think that the ending of Kingdom of Ash was good. I think I would have loved it if I'd read it like when I was a teenager. However, for me now, I don't like it when an ending is too perfect and too satisfying and everything is wrapped up neatly with a little bow, and I feel like we kind of got that kind of ending with Throne of Glass. Obviously, I was right about Gavriel. I felt like that was very heavily foreshadowed. Didn't see it come in with the 13 and then sacrificing themselves. That was a very powerful moment, more so because of Manon's reaction rather than the death of these characters, because I felt like the 13 were always on the periphery. I really liked Astrid as a character. I think I might have mentioned when Manon was first introduced, I thought something was going to happen between the two of them. In terms of where all the characters left off, again, like, I felt like it was all very predictable, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just felt like every character had to be coupled up and happy, with the exception of Manon and Dorian, who decided to leave things as a maybe, and I'm kind of glad about that because they were the one couple that I just never felt fully invested in. I want to be clear because I've talked about this quite a few times. I don't necessarily, when I'm reading a romantasy and it's marketed as a romance forward story, I'm not saying that I want characters to die and I want a tragic ending. When Throne of Glass came out, obviously it was marketed as YA, but becoming more adult as the series goes on, and when I'm reading adult fantasy, I do expect the stakes to feel real. I think there's only so many times a character can be in danger before I start to feel like that danger is just manufactured and nothing is actually gonna progress with that. So I just wanted to make that clear because I got to a certain point in the series and realised that any character who was paired off romantically, Sarah J Maas was never gonna separate those characters. So I think that's why this series for me is sitting around a 4 stars. I really enjoyed my time reading it. It just didn't impact me as much as I wanted it to, but I think if I'd read this many years ago, then maybe it would have. So yeah, I think that's everything that I have to say about this series. In terms of my rankings, something tells me that I'm going to really struggle to lift these up, but I'm going to give it a go. So at the bottom, I've put Throne of Glass and Assassin's Blade, just because Throne of Glass in particular, I don't think is a great introduction to Celena's character. I've got a hair in my mouth. I'm just going to try and move out of the way. Crown of Midnight, I thought had a slow beginning, but I liked the ending. What did I put next? Kingdom of Ash I think I've put next, just because of all of the reasons that I've said. I didn't think it was a bad end to the series, but I think it was just too satisfying for my personal taste. And then what did I put next? Empire of Storms, because I didn't mind that it was more character driven, but that was the point in the series where I felt like the stakes were starting to waver and where I was feeling like the intense moments were manufactured and I felt like they had too much plot armor. Queen of Shadows is next just because I really enjoyed the entire book. And then Heir of Fire I've put in second place because that was, I think, the moment in the series where I started to feel really invested in the characters, and a lot of the newer characters, my favourite characters, were introduced in that book. And then I've put Tower of Dawn at the top because even after finishing this series, Chaol is still one of my favourite characters, and I really liked how this felt like a self-contained story within the world. Obviously, I don't think I would recommend anyone picking this up having not read the rest of the series because you wouldn't have that connection to the characters, but I thought that this was just really well done. So that does bring me to the end of this reading vlog. Thank you so much for watching if you made it this far. I have edited this vlog up until this point, so I know how long it is. I don't know how many people are going to be interested in this vlog, but I've really enjoyed the process of vlogging, reading this series. I sometimes struggle with long series and feeling motivated to continue picking them up, but filming this vlog has definitely helped with that. So yeah, let me know in the comments, what is your favourite Throne of Glass book and how do you feel about my rankings? Let me know who your favourite characters are and what you thought of the ending as well. Otherwise, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Click subscribe if you would like to see more videos from me. But otherwise, I will see you next time. Bye.